I'm not a junkie, but I'm pretty well informed. You know, I mean, I read a few articles every day. You know, I go to the Drudge Report and the Huffington Post. I figure two different sides. I like to go to the Washington Post. Just different, you know, but just a few articles every day. You know, I don't know what bills are about to be passed and where the votes are at that point in that particular afternoon. But I also really enjoy political films, and I like to read nonfiction books on these events. You know, when I had seen Stuff Happens, I had read a number of the books that clearly the playwright had used. The Woodward books, you know, Richard Clarke's book, Susskind's book. And so seeing how he had turned these books that I had read into a riveting piece of drama was, I think, part of my mindset in wanting to do something like that. And that's what I ended up doing on Recount. I ended up turning the leading books on the Recount into, you know, a piece of drama. I don't think there is, because people went insane over the script in Hollywood. They loved it. I think smart scripts are hard to write, but they're also, it's hard to have a script with intelligent ideas that functions as a movie, that is actually entertaining. And people were very excited about this script in Hollywood because it was entertaining. And it's got to do that first, because that's what movies are. You know, if you want an intellectual discourse on a subject matter, read a book on it. But movies are characters seeking goals. And when a smart script comes around, people, you know, like I said, to this script, everyone wanted to meet with me and talk with me about it. We had so many amazing, amazing directors that wanted to do it, which is very rare for an HBO movie of this budget. You know, we had people fighting over it that direct 60, 70 to $200 million studio movies, and the budget for our film was $14 million, or it ended up being $15 million, which is amazing what Jay Roach did with that budget. I mean, just the fact that we had Jay Roach as the director, who is one of the most sought-after directors in Hollywood. He's one of the most successful. Actors love him, and a dirty little secret about making a movie is you have to get some movie stars in it. That's one of the keys to getting any movie made. I get home. Why don't we just start that? I drive home, I get home, I go online. I actually hit pay dirt pretty quickly because John Dean of Watergate fame had become obsessed with the Recount. So he had written a story for Salon.com reviewing every book that he had read on the Recount. So there was this story in which there were 20 books with a little synopsis of every book. I mean, it couldn't have been more helpful to me. And there were two books in particular that talked about the ground wars, how the lawyers fought the ground wars. And I immediately thought, okay, well, if there's a movie, that's the movie. The lawyers fighting the ground wars. So I ordered the two books, Jeffrey Toobin's Too Close to Call, The Accidental President by David Kaplan. Read those two books, found out there were two more books that covered the same terrain. Deadlock by the staff of the Washington Post, although David Von Dreely is the one who really wrote it, and Down and Dirty by Jake Tapper, although Jake's book covered less of the immediate characters of the film than the other three books did. His book kind of expands to other things. But so in those four books, the goal was to find some characters. You know, who are the characters that we can follow that can take us through the roller coaster of the Recount? And it was very, very obvious to me after the first two, after just reading Jeffrey Toobin's book and David Kaplan's book, because they arrived first, that Ron Klain and James Baker would be those two characters. They were both on the ground from day one in Florida, and they were there all the way till the end, till day 36. That they would just be the perfect characters to follow us through this. Then the challenge was, you know, there should have been 1,000 characters in this movie, because that's how many people made, maybe not 1,000, but at least 300, realistically, that were such a huge part of the Recount in so many cities, not just all over Florida, but in Washington, D.C., and Austin, Texas. And then they had people in Nashville, Tennessee, and then people writing briefs for them all over the country. So how do you pare this down into a few people, because that's what a movie has to be, because it's a movie. There just isn't a choice. Now, there's a few more questions. Well, is it responsible to pare it down to all these people? Is this going to be a responsible portrayal of such an important historical event that has integrity? In the case of this script, I felt like it would. That these were some truly main characters that were the de facto, in Ron Klain's case, the de facto head of the legal team. In James Baker's case, the anointed head of the legal team. And then I thought, okay, well, there's chaos all over the state of Florida. There's Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade, Volusia. Then you've got all of that madness that was going on in Tallahassee. So how can you cover it all in a 2-hour period? And that's when I came up with the idea of, well, we'll have a few fronts. You know, we'll have a storyline that takes place in Catherine Harris's office, because so much of what was happening and so much of what represents the whole of the event, in my opinion, is what was occurring in Catherine Harris's office. Then the exact same thing of what represents the whole is what was happening in Palm Beach County, where the people were actually counting or attempting to count the votes. So in some ways, these characters became representative characters of the whole. You know, Ron Klain and his team around him, they represent the entire 50 to 100 lawyers that were involved in the Gore campaign. Now, people ask, well, why not use composite characters? Well, we didn't need to use composite characters. These are real people doing real things. And this is actually what they did. You know, the fact that we can't show what everyone did, I think is not going to be unfair or unreasonable or lack integrity, because what these guys did was that important and does represent what everyone else did. So that was kind of the beginning of the process, was finding who are we going to follow, what's going to be that storyline, and how are we going to be able to take the audience through all of the main events of the recount, the Florida Supreme Court decisions, the getting the votes counted, you know, the advisory opinion, and Bush v. Gore. That was the challenge. Kind of the same. Lots of research. And then I'm actually in the process of interviewing the surviving lawyers right now. I've interviewed, you know, Jack Greenberg and Bob Carter, who were two of the key lawyers in the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And that was the group of lawyers that, you know, that was Thurgood Marshall's team. And Bob Carter and Jack Greenberg were the actual two lawyers in Topeka, Kansas for that trial. I'm going to interview Thurgood Marshall's widow and his son, and a few of the other lawyers that are still alive. You know, they're in their late 80s, early 90s. And there's way less people I can interview for this than I did on Recount. I did about 40 interviews for Recount. But, you know, this is not nearly as complicated or sensitive. I mean, Recount is, everything's, so much of it's still in dispute. Although I don't think, I think the facts are out there. They're just being misinterpreted to this day. And you've got two sides in this highly contentious political climate where Brown v. Board, there's some real clear good guys and bad guys. You know, there's black hats and there's white hats, where in Recount there's lots of gray hats with various shades of gray, and a few black hats, but not really any white hats.